Welcome to War Room Pandemic. This is Stephen K. Bannon. It's the 27th of February, year of our Lord 2020. We are live from the Himalaya Embassy. It's the broadcast center of G News here in Midtown Manhattan. For the next 5 days, we're going to be in New York. We're taking meetings with many of the financial types throughout the world to talk about the financial and economic implications of this global phenomenon, this pandemic that's come out of Wuhan, China. It is episode 27. We started this about 5 or 6 weeks ago here with my cohort, my wingman, Jack Maxey. Jack runs the physical war room every day. He and a number of people keep all the stories up on the website, keep everything rolling. And you can get active into the program like we do on War Room 2020. Here it's hashtag War Room Pandemic. That's all one word. Hashtag War Room Pandemic. Remember, the reason we do these shows is to make sure there's full information out there and everything. Okay, today we're live on the John Fredericks Radio Network. We're live on the Salem Broadcast Radio Network, on America's Voice.news, which is the streaming platform of the Trump movement, and also on 99.1 FM in Chicago and 103.9 FM in the Chicago suburbs of Schaumburg. The virus is a demon, and we cannot allow the demon to hide. That is President Xi's, the way he phrases this from the very beginning. It's been a fascinating exercise in China as they've tried to handle this, the CCP, and we'll get into more of that later in the show. But I think that what I want to start off with today, Jack, is that all we have to fear is fear itself. And this is why on this show, what we try to do is every day lay out the facts, what the real facts are about this pandemic coming out of China and throughout the world. I think President Trump yesterday, and I think it was a seminal moment in this entire episode, really something that's quite epic and the world really has never seen before, hasn't seen in millennia, or at least maybe 100 years, I guess, with the Spanish flu. But President Trump had a press conference last night, and what I think people saw was kind of a command presence,
Absolutely.
Right? He came up, and there are a number of things, I want to get into those. And like I said, we know the 2020 show is more about politics, but there was always going to be a merger of kind of politics in this pandemic and the economics around it. And I want to get into that a little bit today in the first segment of the show. President Trump, I thought, had real command presence. One of the things I thought was most important, it was a very calming, he wasn't just, all over the map. It was pretty focused on actions he had taken and say, hey, look, we're preparing for the worst, but we're hoping for the best. And here's the actions we've taken to date, and here's other actions we're taking. He had the team up there. I thought the team was very impressive. One of the most important things I think that happened was there wasn't an addition to the team of a czar. He took the vice president and put the vice president into command. And one of the things people should understand, there's actually a commission, a biodefense commission that's been around for a number of years. They have, and this is bipartisan commission, has Senator Lieberman, I think, is a part of that.
Tom Daschle. Tom Ridge. These are not necessarily Trump fans.
Tom Ridge, not Trump's fan, but these are kind of part of the establishment. This thing's been around for a number of years, and they have actually been advocating for a number of years to have the vice president be actually in charge of the entire biodefense situation in the United States, because it would give a major part of the administration, obviously somebody that's in the direct chain of command of making things work in the administration. So President Trump, I think, last night reiterated that, we've got a team. There was a little bit of dust kicked up afterwards, particularly by the mainstream media, and that, hey, Azar thought he was in charge, who's in charge? I thought Azar handled that very well. At the press conference, it's pretty obvious that the vice president's kind of in charge of this. I think maybe Azar runs the operational part of this team, but I thought it was a very good presentation. In particular, and you had some good things that we talked about overnight after the conference and this morning, Jack, particularly about some of the actions President Trump took at the time that were highly criticized by even WHO, and it turns out that President Trump was actually correct, and the other people were wrong. You remember, let's talk about the travel at first. President Trump,
for example, in the first days of February, President Trump declined to travel to the United States for Chinese citizens coming from the mainland.
These are Chinese nationals, right?
Right. And any U.S. who traveled to China were going to be quarantined for 14 days if they'd been in Hubei province. Now, at the time, let's remember, the World Health Organization said this was unnecessary to interfere with international travel and trade and might increase fear around the globe. The reality is Trump is not a scientist, but the guy has great sensibility. And he was criticized at the time for doing this, and thank God he did.
I tell you, it was a bold move. Remember, and I think this was the message, the subtext of last night. We have nothing to fear except fear itself. This is obviously, something that people are trying to get their hands around. They're trying to get their hands around the health part of it. They're trying to get their hands around the economics part of it. They're trying to get their hands around the logistics part of it. It's obviously bringing up, highlighting many of the things that have happened on this globalization project over the last 10, 20, 30 years. We've had so many experts in here. We're going to have more as this goes on. In fact, one of the announcements we want to make to date is that with the good offices of America's Voice and the John Fredericks Radio Network, John Fredericks being our co-producer here, we're going to try to get the show going 7 days a week like we did on impeachment. We think it's that much breaking news, and we've gotten such an overwhelming demand of people who want to see it. Remember, if you want to participate in the show, please go to hashtag War Room Pandemic, all one word. We want to hear what you have to say, your observations and your criticisms. We know that you're often there talking about the sound quality, so hopefully we worked out a lot of that. We're on remote today up in New York City. I want to go to the next part about yesterday was Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi earlier in the day, or I guess right around the time of the press conference, said the president doesn't know what he's talking about. And I thought President Trump handled this very well last night to say, hey, look, this is not the time to have this partisan bickering. President Trump put forward a $2.5 billion emergency program on Monday. The White House team had worked over the weekend on that. Even the Republicans said, hey, look, we think it would be maybe $4 billion. And Schumer came in highly critical, highly partisan. Hey, this is $8 billion. It shows Trump and the team are way behind the power curve here. But I thought what President Trump would say, look, we're here to work together for the American people. Hey, every time I've put some sort of emergency measure up, you guys are always fighting me, whether it's for the wall, whether it's for the back in 17 for the augmentation of the military budget. It's always been fight. But hey, if you want to put $8 billion up, we're not trying to throw money around, but if you want to put $8 billion up, let's work together and do this. I think President Trump hit the right tone, and the tonality was, look, we're in this as a country. Quite frankly, we're in this as a world, right? And I think this goes back to the whole situation of how you have to protect your borders, right? And how you have to make sure you know what's coming in and out of your country. And also this globalization project, as we've seen now, everybody's coming into a wake of things that Peter Navarro, myself, and others have been saying for years. Hey, the China price has a cost to it. Part of that, having the cheapest price, because everything's made, under the CCP's guidance in China and by slave labor, essentially, has a cost to it. Now we're seeing the cost of that. But I thought President Trump hit a real tone of, hey, everybody calm down. Here's the actions we've taken today. We're planning for the worst. We're going to hope for the best, and that we're really going to get this thing sorted. And then you had the Democrats kind of bickering. I hope everybody, and I think one of the best things I saw today before coming to the show is Morning Joe, who are no fans of the president, right? I thought they had I think it was Joe Scarborough had a very positive tweet about President Trump having his entire team up there and the entire team presenting to the nation.
Well, one of the beautiful things, they're not beautiful, obviously it's a bad situation, but think about it. We've had such partisan fighting over the last 2 years. And one of the great things about the history of this country is when we get put up against the wall, we join hands. And I think that's what the president is trying to say, that now is not the time to be partisan, that we all have to work together. And this is where you see this guy's real leadership potential come to the fore.
That's what I think. And look, I'm as partisan as the hardest partisan. But in this thing, this is why we started the show 6 weeks ago, to make sure we started to get the information out there. Two other things, and we're going to have to come back on the break on one of these. Number one is, let's go, there are some issues that have to be addressed, I think have to be addressed quickly. One is this test kit. Okay, we've only got about 30 seconds here, but this test kit, there's this whole issue about the test. Columbia University, one of the top guys came out last night. I think this one thing people have to ask is, say, hey, why can't you get from Korea, Japan, these other places, Italy is testing. These tests are as much art as they are science. This is not a perfect, because you're dealing with a virus that mutates, and this is the test itself is quite complicated. One of the things we do know CDC wanted was to have a central control that everything had to be sent to Atlanta. Okay, everything had to be sent to Atlanta instead of being tested at the field regional offices. We only got a few seconds. In fact, let me wrap up and we'll go to break. We'll come back with this, Jack. But I want to get, the testing's a big deal because right now on the CDC website, it just has, I think, 496 official tests. Obviously, that's got to be, something different than that. Okay, listen, we're going to come back. It's episode 27. We're in pandemic. We'll be back in a second.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Welcome back, War Room Pandemic. We're live from Midtown Manhattan at the Himalaya Embassy. That is the broadcast center here for G News. G News is a media company that broadcasts into mainland China and to all the places around the world where the expatriate Chinese live, so they can get constantly breaking news on what's happening in the mainland. We really want to thank Miles Guo and the other people, the great team here at G News for helping us put on these remotes of War and Pandemic. We're going to be doing many of these over the coming weeks as we start to deal with the folks on Wall Street and corporate America about what exactly this contagion is going to mean for jobs and for the economy, which is going to be a big part of this. I do want to say that we're on top of the news this morning, even as we spoke in the last break about this test kit. Secretary Azar is testifying, you should know, live. We've got that on the channel. He said at least 40 public health laboratories should now be able to test using the modified existing CDC test kits. So that's been a big change. I think they're now getting out to the field and not going to have it come back. At least our understanding
This is a big change in the last 24 hours.
Last 24 hours. I think one of the things you're seeing, I want to go back to the biodefense, Jack, is that Trump time, right? Trump time is, Trump is not a politician. He didn't come out of politics. He's a businessman. He's a developer and a builder and a media executive. He knows how things have to move in quick time. I want to go back to that biodefense. They have been arguing for a long time that you needed a more focused chain of command. They've been actually asking for the vice president so things could happen quicker. You could break through the bureaucratic morass. I think some of the things in the testing and some of these other things, people were moving in that kind of just typical pattern of bureaucracy and not saying, hey, this thing's an epidemic, it's becoming a pandemic, we got to get on top of this.
Well, for example, one of the things they said in their press release last night, they were very excited that their president was appointing somebody like Mike Pence to be the overall head of this. They hope this will go forward in future administrations. And this is their quote from in 2015. They said, "We said in 2015 that the nation lacks a single, centralized, high-level leader to control, prioritize, and coordinate and hold departments and agencies accountable for national biodefense. We recommend that the president institutionalize leadership of biodefense at the White House with the vice president in charge." So this is a pretty strong endorsement from a group of people who are not necessarily fans, but are fans of the country, right? This is a time when everybody is going to put red, white, and blue on their hearts.
Yeah. Now, we know that there are also the teams being augmented today. We hear that other people from State Department, I think the president alluded to this last night in the press conference, will be other people already in the administration, in the government, not political appointees, but I think some permanent parts of the apparatus are going to augment the team. I think those announcements can be made over the coming days. The test kit situation definitely has to get sorted out. I mean, particularly on the CDC site, you have still under 500 tests, at least have been completed according to that. That's all going to get sorted out. The other thing is Dr. Fauci last night stepped up and talked about the vaccine process. And I think there's a little bit of disconnect there, and we hope we're going back to the guys that they get more information on this. But he walked through a pattern that seemed to be fairly, the fairly traditional pattern of, hey, we're going to test here, get humans. And the way I calculated last night live was this was going to take 18 months, right? That doesn't feel like Trump time. Trump seems like, particularly when you look at these emergency budgets, whether it's Schumer's $8 billion, the Republicans' $4 billion, President Trump's $2.5 billion, there'll be some sort of agreement on this. There'll be many billions of dollars. In all these aspects, I think $1 billion was allocated for almost like a Manhattan-type project for this to get this virus, to get a vaccine up and going. And I know that you've said, hey, you think there's a dozen companies out there already that are in various stages of trying to come forward with the vaccine. Get us up to date on that.
Well, I think that Fauci was being clear and quite honest. I mean, one of the things you have to remember, SARS virus from 2003. They've been working for 17 years on a vaccine. The whole world has been working on it, and they still don't have one that's effective. You have to remember that sometimes these vaccines can create an immune response inside the person who's been inoculated that it can end up being worse than the disease itself. I'll give an example of the SARS vaccine. Hatfield's told us about this, which is kind of frightening. They think that they've finally got the vaccine. This is only 2 years ago. They inoculate a group of mice with the vaccine. and they get antibodies and they think the mice are okay. Then they inoculate the mice with a live virus, and what happens is their antibodies go crazy and literally over-respond. So these things die almost in a day.
That's where these things are art. This is as much art as science.
Right, and you got to remember, we have to do these on human trials, right? I mean, you have to be very certain that you're not going to kill the patient.
Oh, that's where you have to have, obviously, there's going to be some...
And the retrovirals are probably, Steve, I would say, in the near term, are what we're going to be looking at for saving us in the near term, in this 18-month period of time. And I also think that everybody has to be prepared for the idea of this virus becoming a virus in the family of viruses that we're afraid of.
I don't think it's...
So that's why the vaccine is mostly important for years and decades forward.
Yeah. No, this is, look, and part of this, let's talk about the change of behavior. Remember, there's two, as Stephen Hatfield, one of our co-hosts on here, has said many, many times, you have two ways to kind of solve this. You have a vaccine, and then you have social separation. Let's go back to the social separation point. I think this shows part of the leadership of President Trump and the team last night. San Francisco started with declaring a health emergency. People should not set their hair on fire when this is done. This is a normal process of what you do. As they said last night from the stage, you're going to get the emergency measures out. You're going to dust off the plan. You're going to see what we got in place. You're going to make sure everybody's, knows what their billet is, knows what they're supposed to do. You're seeing cities and counties around the country start to announce these emergency measures, and that's just remember, what Hatfield said from the beginning, the front line in the public health is not in Washington, D.C. The front line is in your local community. That's where the public health service is going to be, is really going to meet this pandemic head on. And that's where we're seeing a natural, logical progression. So people, in fact, the opposite, what you should want is your local county officials and officials saying, hey, here's the emergency measures we're going to put in. Here's what the emergency plan is. Here's what the schools know, et cetera.
And essentially, everybody is enlisted in this battle. It starts out with you practicing hygiene, wash your hands all the time, try not to touch your eyes, your face. Have social separation. Stay more than 3 feet apart. Some are even saying that 6 feet would be necessary. And I think that you're going to see that this is going to be a good exercise for the country to show that we can work together. I think that's what the president was trying to get to last night.
Let's go to, some news. The woman in California, we've got about a minute left.
Okay.
Jump in here. Give us because this is kind of a case that, this thing's got different mutations. People don't really, pops up in some place, pops up in Iran's popped up now, I think in the Vatican or in Rome. People are talking about it. What happened in California yesterday?
In California, a woman showed up at her GP not feeling well several days ago. She did not meet any of the criteria for the coronavirus. But some excellent clinical doctors in her area looked at her, and they'd been studying the Lancet articles and looking at CAT scans of some of the victims, and they said, wow, this lady looks like she might have coronavirus, but she had never traveled to China. She didn't know anybody who traveled. They couldn't follow up with any case study of a potential person that she'd been in contact with. So she was finally hospitalized. She was finally tested. She does have it. We hope that she's recovering well. But it's one of those giant question marks.
So right now, what we officially have is 59 cases. We only got a few seconds left here before break. 59 cases. A bunch of those, 14 of those, I think, came off of the ship in Yokohama that were flown back here. That President Trump wasn't too happy about at the time. But let's tell you what, we're going to take a break. Episode 27, War Room Pandemic.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Back to War Room Pandemic. It's 27 February, the year of our Lord 2020. This is episode 27 of the show that once a day for an hour a day and online 24 hours a day, we try to get you all the information throughout the world on the most important events in this pandemic. This demon that's come out of China, as President Xi has said. We cannot allow this demon to hide. I think President Trump's watchword is the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. And that's why we're here to give you the information. Today, I'm kind of proud of the fact that two of the topics we've been talking about, we have breaking news. Number one, on the test, it looks like the CDC is getting a little more organized in that. They're now going to have tests, I think they said in 49 test centers. I'm sure that's going to expand over time as these tests get worked on. As we said, these tests are as much art as they are science. So it's always in process, and people are working to make it better. In addition, as we talked earlier, we thought the team was going to be augmented from other people in the administration. Has been a very big breaking news about that, Jack. You want to get the listeners up to speed on what's happening?
Mike Pence just appointed Ambassador Debbie Birx to serve as the White House Coronavirus Response Coordinator. Ambassador Birx is a world-renowned global health official and physician. She's a scientist, a mom with 3 decades of public health experience, including virulent diseases, their vaccines, and interagency coordination. She's developed and patented vaccines, including leading one of the most influential HIV trials in history. She's worked for 3 different administrations. She's solid as rock.
Yeah, she got a reputation of can-do, and I think now you're seeing Trump time. That's Vice President Pence now heads up the task force. Azar's clearly reporting to him, and now Debbie Birx going to be the White House coordinator. You're going to see, I think, things really start to move at a much more rapid pace.
And one of the things we've learned in the background recently, the United States military is really squared away about this because force protection is everything for them, right? Pandemics are something that they're thinking about every day. And Ambassador Birx previously coordinated Army, Navy, Air Force in their HIV efforts and their pandemic efforts.
She's a heavyweight.
She's solid.
That's what we had heard earlier from our sources, that there was going to be some major announcements. And I think the most important thing, you're not bringing czars from the outside. You're bringing people that are already on the team. One of the things for the people at home, remember, we're on the John Fredericks Radio Network. We're on Salem Broadcasting throughout the nation. We're also on AmericasVoice.news, which is the streaming platform for the Trump revolution. And we're on FM 99.1 and FM 103.9 in Chicago. For people watching on YouTube later, or the podcast, people that are watching now live on America's Voice. In the background, we're shifting. We've got the Pandemic War Room logo, but we're also showing other photos, other things of Wuhan, the city. You've got old China, Wuhan of old, and now you have new Wuhan, where the streets are totally empty. So we're trying to show you, as we rotate through, different shots of Wuhan. I want to go to back to the actions that are being taken, right? Some of these actions, that's what I think people are looking at is, what's going on to actually stop this from coming here. Remember, this pandemic, you can shut down the travel, you can do the social separation, you're looking for a vaccine, and I think President Trump said that, he say, hey, we're preparing for the worst, but we're hoping for the best. But at some time, this thing's going to come. It's in Italy, it's in South Korea. We're going to get to that in the next segment. What's happening throughout the world, it's at the Vatican, right? People are talking about this. It's now, in South Korea, it's getting much worse. In China, you got additional things. Now, we do know that the port cities, particularly the ports on the West Coast, and this is one of the things we're picking up from the Wall Street and from the financial guys, there's obviously a slowdown in port traffic coming in to the West Coast, Jack. There's no doubt that the supply chain, remember the supply chain, and the supply chain's twofold. Number one, it's the health supply chain. It's the mask, it's the drugs, and people are talking about that nonstop on CNBC today. Jim Cramer was talking about that specifically. And then you've got just the materials that were the end products that we buy here and what we ship here. Talk to us about particularly the California ports.
Well, the California ports are seeing some serious slowdown. I mean, just the volume is not there. And I think one of the things that we're going to see as time goes on, it goes back to what was said a few weeks ago by an economist. You can't turn off these systems and then expect to be able to turn them right back on. It's going to take time to get the machinery re-lubricated. There are empty boxes sitting all over China. There was anecdotal stories last week of ships leaving Shanghai with 20% of cargo. I mean, we're going to be looking at a situation somewhere down the line where we're going to have trouble with actual shipping crates around the world because they're stacked up in Chinese ports. And they're necessary for other global trade as well.
Okay, you can participate in the show. We're going to get to some of the comments, some of your observations in the next segment. It's hashtag War Room Pandemic. This is episode 27. We'll be back in a moment. When we get back, we're going to talk about what's going on around the world, also what's going on in China. We're here on the John Fredericks Radio Network, Salem Broadcast Radio Network, America's Voice.news as we live stream, and also on FM 99.1, FM 103.9 in Chicago. Stephen K. Bannon, Jack Maxey. We're going to return in just a moment.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Welcome back to War Room Pandemic. It's episode 27. We are live from Midtown Manhattan at the broadcast center of G News. I want to thank them today for allowing us to do this, and also our partners at John Fredericks Radio Network, Salem Broadcasting Radio Network, and AmericasVoice.net, plus FM 99.1, FM 103.9 in Chicago. Okay, Jack, we said there's not, and people ought to get used to this. Every day on the show there's going to be breaking news as we're up, things we've talked about. During the break, we saw that Governor Cuomo is now doing a, press conference at the same time as our show is on, and he is coming down pretty hard on CDC about how long it took to do the test and get it back there. We knew this was going to be an issue. That's what we want to get in front of it. This whole testing situation has to be worked out. That's why Azar is leaning into this a little bit more. This was teed up, as we brought up 4 weeks ago, if you had been watching the show, when Fauci stood up at the very first press conference they had in the White House. And he got there and he said something about the test. He says, hey, these tests only work half the time. You know, I talked to Jason Miller at the time on Dwarven 2020. I said, hey, that's not the kind of thing, unless you put the facts out there. Now we know, because it's more art than science. It's tough to put these tests together. They had made a decision to fly it, to FedEx it back to Atlanta, to the CDC headquarters to do the test, not out in the field. Maybe it's because it's too complicated to do it. That's all obviously being worked out. Now they're pressing out in the field. But Cuomo, and I'm not saying that this is to politicize it. It's clearly, you're going to have this aspect of it, but he's doing a live press conference to really talk about that today. Okay, I want to go around the world, because there is this situation. Remember, this show up to now has been very China-centric. And the reason it's been very China-centric, there's something biblical in scale going on, Old Testament, in China, in Wuhan. Remember, as we sit here today, as you listen to the show, 1/10 of the world's population is essentially under quarantine or some aspect of quarantine in China. You have Hubei province, which is essentially the size of France. It's got, 60 to 80 million people. That's in a hard lockdown. As we rotate some of the photos today in the background here at G News, you'll see some of the streets of Wuhan. Wuhan is a city that has 40% more population than New York City. In old Wuhan, was jam-packed with people, all humanity. One of the reasons they say this new, consolidation of humanity in these mega cities is one of the reasons they think that these viruses can spread so quickly. But Wuhan today is a ghost town, because it's under hard lockdown, hard quarantine. They got this thing called the grid system. That's really, they go door to door, and hey, if they think you got the flu, you're going to a quarantine center. And if you know that's not the norovirus that's in the studio, just one of our producers. They think you've got in fact, if you cough like that, you're going to a quarantine center, and the next time that you leave the quarantine center is through the back in an ambulance to have your body cremated. That's how tough this lockdown is. Plus, they have another 400 or 500 million. This is according to the Chinese Communist Party, in some sort of stand down in those cities. Self-imposed, quasi quarantine with limited movement. It's one of the reasons this grid system that the ports in Los Angeles, in San Pedro, the ships are empty or the ports are empty, is because they've had a very difficult time getting people to go back to work, particularly in southern China. They're trying to get the factories up, as we've been reporting every day. These factories, a lot of these people are saying, hey, I don't know if I should go back, and these factories are now running, even the ones that are stood up are at 10 or 20% forces. But let's go to Europe for a second, Jack. I want to let's go do Italy, France, and particularly Macron had some very tough things to say today, as more officials throughout the world start to take a more formal process in this. Let's start in Italy.
Italy is reporting more than 500 infections. There are 15 deaths from the coronavirus. The Pope earlier was praying for coronavirus sufferers on Ash Wednesday, and while mask-free, he shook hands with everybody and kissed worshipers, including a child, in St. Peter's Square. But today, the Pope is not feeling very well, and he's going to be staying home for a while.
They said, I think the first report is flu-like symptoms, and he was canceling. He was not going to do his morning thing. We'll give you a bigger update tomorrow.
Certainly, we'll give you that as we know it.
But and also, there's some early reports saying, hey, there may have been some coronavirus patients in the crowd. We're going to get all that sorted. We do know that the Iranian ambassador, the former ambassador to the Vatican, it's reported. We just pulled a news report that he's actually died. right? He's actually passed away from the coronavirus. Now, I'm pretty sure he's not the ambassador today. They say he's a former ambassador. He's died. But also in Italy, one of the things they're going to do this weekend is a big controversy in France. France, at least as of last night, we had a very big dinner in Washington, D.C. at the Hay Adams Hotel for all the populists and nationalists that were coming together to go to CPAC. We had kind of a kickoff dinner before I came up here to New York to do these meetings over the next 5 days. But there they said one of the criticisms is that Macron, at least as of last night, had not closed the border. And one of the reasons he was not going to close the border, it's so central to the globalist project that he was very hesitant to do that. There was actually this talk about a soccer game in Lyon that, thousands of people of Italy were going to come over. It was quite controversial. Everybody's going to show up. And in Italy, I think they've announced this Sunday, and remember, soccer is as high church as the religious services. I think they're announced they're going to play the soccer matches, but they're not going to have anybody in the stands. So they're going to play it for national team. These soccer matches were like NFL football games are going to play with empty stadiums. We got a couple minutes left in this segment. What else we have?
Well, it's similar to what they're doing in Japan. Japan has closed all of their schools, which is amazing. In Asian
and by the way,
culture,
education in Japan is high church. So for those, for the Japanese to close the schools now to April, I believe it is.
Yes, all sporting events are closed. They've shut down their soccer league, their professional rugby league.
Their baseball is going to play televised games, nobody in the stands.
Right.
And so they're going as many soccer and baseball in the other sports, rugby and soccer. They've just canceled.
Anything with contact, they don't want them to be playing.
Yes,
but baseball, I think they're going to let them play so you can watch it on home.
Real quickly, about a minute left in this segment. I want to go to Macron. Macron has been somebody who's been very hesitant at this. He actually went and visited some people. Tell me what he said.
He was in a hospital this morning visiting a victim in Paris, and he made a statement to the press when he came out of the room. We have a crisis before us. An epidemic is on its way, and we need to prepare.
So I think, look, one of the debates has been, particularly in Italy, this thing has sprung up so much in Italy. And remember, in Italy, they've stopped religious services, they've shut down universities. In Lombardy, they've basically quarantined 12 towns and villages in Lombardy, which is the most productive part of the industrial north and one of the richest parts of all Italy in the north. They've actually shut that down. That's now in the same type of quarantine almost as Wuhan, not quite as severe, being that it's Italy. But okay, we're going to get to all this. We got so much to go through. We're going to take a short commercial break here. It's War Room Pandemic is the show. It's episode 27. We want your participation, just like we do in 2020. The way to do that is go to hashtag War Room Pandemic, all one word. We get all your observations, all your comments, and all your questions. Stephen K. Bannon, Jack Maxey. We're going to return on all of our distribution platforms in just a minute.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Welcome back to War Room Pandemic. Stephen K. Bannon. It's 27 February, year of our Lord 2020, episode 27. Jack, I want to go, before we go back to Asia for a second, in the United Kingdom, what happened? Prince George's schools, but other schools.
They shut down 30 schools where some of the kids had traveled to Italy on school trips, as they do around Europe. So 30 secondary schools are closed down. The Young Prince's School has 4 students who, out of an abundance of caution because of their European travel, have been asked to stay home for 14 days. So as you said, Steve, they don't care if you're a billionaire or a pauper.
Yeah.
This
Two things you should remember. You may not have any interest in this virus, but this virus has an interest in you. And that's why you got to get fully up to speed on all the information that's out there. It's one of the things we try to provide throughout the day on our show. And also go to War Room Pandemic, 24 hours a day. Jack Maxey and the team putting up constant information and everything that's going on. We are going to try to get Rosemary Gibson back in, if not tomorrow, then our Saturday. It looks like we're trying to go 7 days a week. One of the things we're definitely trying to do is talk about what these emergency measures, these budget measures have for getting production of drugs, and particularly things made here stood up. In addition, what's the latest coming out of China? Because it's going to take, there's some gap between the time you can get production up here, obviously, and what looks like maybe some potential gaps. We don't know, but we're going to find out all that information as we're drilling down. If you want to participate in the show, it is hashtag War Room Pandemic, all one word. Before we got to go.
I got a little breaking thing Hatfield just sent me.
Yes,
apparently the CDC has just announced that there have been 4,000 tests done. Apparently, the last 48 hours, they've gotten this out to several places. And that's a dramatic increase, but shows that we're moving in the right direction.
If you watch this show over the last week, we've been hammering CDC on this website about why you only have 496 tests up. There's got to be more than that, since Italy's got thousands, Korea's got thousands. Now you're starting to see it. We're starting to get better information. So 4,000 tests, which is great. I want to go to the Korean situation. My sources in Korea, I'm pretty well sourced over there. The Korean situation looks like it could get a lot worse, and I think there's going to be some announcements throughout the weekend. But talk about this service.
We have a serviceman at an air base south of Seoul, a little bit north of the epicenter of the virus, and he was tested positive. Now, he has almost no symptoms, and this can give you an idea of how this might play out, because remember, only 15% of the people get really sick. His base has said, you are going to self-quarantine in off-base housing. We'll be in contact with you by telephone all day long, and you're just going to stay there for 14 days.
Okay, we're gonna get all more information on this. Remember, one of the tricky things or hideous things about this is this virus is asymptomatic for many, many days. You may be at your most at the thing if you're giving it to other people during that time frame. Okay, we're gonna wrap up today. We're here in New York. We'll be here in New York for several more days. One of the things we're doing is talking to the top brains in the world, in the financial community on Wall Street, also in the corporations throughout the world, to find out exactly the contagion, not the virus, but the economic contagion, how that's going to spread, how it's going to affect the world economy, how it's going to affect the American economy. You're going to get all of that on War Room Pandemic. We'll be back tomorrow morning live from New York City, from Midtown Manhattan at 11 a.m. And also, we're going to make some announcements tomorrow. We're going to try to stand up with John Ferguson 7 days a week for War Room Pandemic. Stephen K. Bannon, Jack Maxey, want to thank the folks at G News. We'll be back tomorrow at 11.